and known, Chinese are incredibly innovative and they're giving you better value. Yeah. So I had an experience where we landed up in China and we found there was a small pot of jar of one of our brands already selling and giving a much better consumer experience than what we could have potentially done. Yeah. And therefore a brand had been taken away. Or when Myanmar market opened up, a few years back, we went there and we found one of our Indian brands had been registered with the government as a local brand. And then you wonder, gosh, this is our asset, and it's just gone away. So these are exceptionally important issues, no doubt, but those are just one aspect of it. And therefore, I started splitting the topic into two parts. It's about building brands, it's about across geographies, but potentially it's also about across time, because when you're dealing with assets like brands, and some of these brands have survived for 200 years, 300 years, some of our Unilever brands have been around for 150 years. It is about managing brands across time as well. And time poses many challenges. Consumer demands changes, aspirations change, cultures change, trends change, and therefore it is about managing a brand across time as well. Professor Reddy talked about managing brands across channels, exceptionally important. When you're dealing with a modern trade versus a small shop, the challenges are different, the shopper profiles are different. And therefore it is about managing brands across channels as well. Certainly it's about managing brands across cultures. Yeah. So I manage some of our brands which go from a very conservative society like Pakistan or Malaysia or Indonesia to some extent to a very liberated economy like Australia and Sydney, and my brands are the same. Yeah. So how do I manage them across these very, very different cultural dynamics is exceptionally important. And I could go on and on and on. It is about managing brands across many dimensions, like business models, like your internal people, your internal talent. Yeah? So there are many, many dimensions to managing and building brands. And therefore, eventually I came to the conclusion that it's fundamentally, the discussion needs to be about building brands. Yeah? And there will be many different dimensions to it, but fundamentally it's about building brands. And what I'm going to try and do is to share my experience. I tried to Google before I came in here, as you normally do. In life, when you're in trouble, you call Google. You call God second. Yeah? So I Googled to see, okay, what is out there as far as building brands is concerned. And there's a menu of models there. Yeah? So you can select whichever shape you like. So if you like pyramids, you can go for the top left one. If you're a guy who likes circles, you can go for the bottom left one or the bottom right one. And if you really are the romantic type, you can go for the one that's in the bottom left, which is about a flower and a bloom and a heart. So there are zillions of models out there about building brands. But I'm not going to attempt try and do another shape or another design here. But I'll really try and share with you about my experiences. And therefore, I eventually came to the first thing about building brands is really about being absolutely, obsessively uncompromising. You need to be absolutely obsessive about what your brand stands for and defend it with your life. It's very easy in corporate culture, in the tensions that Professor Reddy talked about, that you can sway and you can change your brand and you will not notice it, because it is what we call a salami effect. You'll change the brand a little bit and the next person who comes after you will change the brand a little more and you will not notice it. But in 10 years' time, the brand has changed and it's no longer what it used to be. And therefore, it's absolutely vital to be absolutely uncompromising, obsessively uncompromising, and defending your brand roots with your life. And I'll talk a little more about that. And some of the brands that have survived for 200 years and how they managed to do that. So that's my first lesson, being really obsessively uncompromising. The second is adaptive. Trust me, I did not change my presentation looking at that word from your presentation, Professor Reddy. But you need to be adaptive because the markets change, there are business opportunities which emerge, and then you need to figure out how do I really go about tapping into these opportunities. But the real challenge is how do you do this tightrope? How do you walk the tightrope between being obsessively uncompromising about your brand and being adaptive? And that is the job of a brand manager. That is your day job, that's your night job, that's your weekend job, that's your shower time job. That's your job 24/7. Yeah, because if you're not living and breathing your brand 24/7, you're not doing a good job of the brand. So I'm going to talk a little more about that. Let me take the first aspect, which is being obsessively uncompromising about your brand. And I'm going to talk about a brand which I suppose many of us love, well I certainly love, particularly in the evening, and which has a great brand myth, which is Johnnie Walker. Yeah, so this is a brand which was born in 1819 when there was a young lad from Scotland who inherited this grocery store from his father when his father died. And in those days, blending malts was actually illegal in Scotland, because they wanted to preserve the true taste of the single malt. But he did not like some of the single malts that he himself was selling. He started blending them, and he discovered that actually a blended scotch tastes much better. Now, those are the roots of the brand. So if you are a brand manager for Johnnie Walker Black Label or a Red Label or for Johnnie Walker, it's very, very important for you to understand this myth, to understand this story, because this legend has survived for over 100 years, actually for 200 years. And this story keeps coming back, and it keeps feeding the brand time and time again. It builds a culture within the organization. It builds values within the organization. It builds brand ethics within the organization. And therefore, it's exceptionally important for us to respect our roots of the brand. Similarly, in Unilever, what William Unilever started off the organization as, selling a simple bar of soap when there was an epidemic in London, is a very rich history that you need to preserve and narrate that to every new joinee that comes in your organization or starts adding a brand. So understanding your brand myth and preserving that and being uncompromisingly obsessive about it is exceptionally important, because those are your roots, and you need to water those roots if the brand has to really grow. The second aspect really is about a brand purpose, and this goes well beyond functional benefits or emotional benefits or self-expressive benefits. This is really about why does the brand exist in the world? What is the one reason why it is there and selling on shelves? Yeah, pretty much like a human purpose. It's important to define what the purpose of the brand is. And in the case of Johnnie Walker, as we know, the tagline, "Keep Walking," is an exceptionally popular tagline. It is about the human hope. At the end of the day, it is a fundamental human truth. Yeah, human beings want to progress. Yeah, we do want to kind of bounce back. That's one quality in human beings, which is captured in this brand, and of course a statement that Richard Branson makes over here. And therefore, being true to your brand purpose at all points of time is exceptionally important. Yeah, you might change your functional benefits, you might change your delivery mechanisms and go from a double-edged sword, a double-edged razor, to a single one or to a triple one, but your brand purpose needs to remain the same. That's your moral compass. That's the true norm. You have to keep pointing your brand in the direction that your brand needs to keep moving. Yeah, so make sure that your brand compass, your brand purpose is something that you put up on your wall and you see it every day. You should probably not even require to see it, because if you're living the brand, you should be able to word it out no matter what time you're woken up in the night. So brand purpose, you've got to be uncompromising. No matter what the opportunity in the markets are, you cannot let your brand purpose go. You may adapt it, you may rechristen it, you may use it in the local language, you may do it a little differently, but the essence of the brand purpose needs to be exactly what it is. The third, to my mind, is the core benefit. You need to be absolutely clear. Why does your brand sell? What is that single reason why your brand sells? In the case of Johnnie Walker, it's all about the flavor. It's the uncompromising part of the brand flavor that they will defend it with their life. Yeah, and therefore you need to be absolutely clear about your core benefit. And therefore, if Gillette entering India and providing that razor is about a safe, smooth shave at that price, you've got to preserve the safe and smooth while tackling the price angle. So be absolutely clear about what is your core benefit. Brand recognition, exceptionally important, especially in today's world. When you buy a lot of your stuff from Amazon, you can go online. You cannot have different brand expressions. You cannot have different brand typographies or different brand colors, because otherwise you're weakening your brand yourself. And therefore, in the case of Johnnie Walker, it was all about this square bottle, which is a very pragmatic reason. They started by saying, how do we ship more bottles with less breakage? And the square bottle was emerged. Equally, the 24-degree label, because when you're at 24 degrees, it gives you the best, sort of typeface, the maximum typeface. So you've got to be very clear as a brand manager, what are some of the key tenets of my brand. And brand recognition, is absolutely vital, especially in today's day and age of online shopping. Brand icon, if you're lucky, if you are fortunate to be the brand manager of a brand that has a brand icon, preserve it like your child. And that, because these takes millions and billions of dollars, and it might be getting drawn on a, on a napkin, but finally they end up being worth, what the entire organization is all about. And all of us, I'm sure, have an iPhone or some sort of an Apple product. The name does not appear; it's just a written Apple. That is worth billions and billions of dollars. Similarly the swoosh, and you can go on and on. So if you are the brand manager of a brand that has an icon, please preserve it. Yeah, no matter what the market situation, no matter where you're going, make sure that you're preserving that. In this case, it's about the striding man, which has been there from 1820, and now we're nearly 200 years down the line. Let me share with you the story of the legend of Johnny Walker before I then come to how a brand like that can indeed start adapting. So, can you help me with this? So this is really the story of Johnny Walker, and how the legend got born and how it's been preserved over the years.
Here's a true story about a young lad named John. Just a local farm boy. There was something special about the lad. A glint in his eye, a fire in his belly, a spring in his step. And one day, he went for a walk. And this walk began when his father died. The year was 1819, and he was just 14 years old. Bereavement counselling. Well, these were the days when young boys were sent into the fields. The mills, mines, tough times. But young John was smart enough to be lucky. His father's farm, where he was born and raised, was sold. The proceeds used to open a grocer's. Big responsibility for the wee lad. He went shopping called Mama, with his name on the door, John Walker. Pop Johnny, as the world now knows him. Back then, all grocers stocked a range of local single malts, but they could be inconsistent. For John, that wasn't good enough. He began blending different malts together as a way of offering his customers a consistent, unique product. Now this backroom art quickly developed into a commercial proposition, and a very profitable one. And because there's nothing like a commercial proposition to stir the Scottish heart, it grew quickly into an industry filled with ambitious entrepreneurial styles. John thrived in this environment, and so too soon with his sons, Robert and Alexander, who joined him in his journey. The Walkers became the biggest name in a rapidly growing industry. They were unstoppable. In one bold bit of 19th century corporate raiding, they bought the famed distillery at Cardew, lock, stock, and ensuring their supply of this silky single malt, and guaranteeing, more importantly, that none of the other big blenders could get their hands on it. But young Alexander wasn't content with being Scotland's biggest blender, not ambitious enough for that, no. He convinced the ship's captains of Glasgow to act as agents for him, and drove the whisky bearing his father's name across the globe. By 1860, he had developed the square bottle. Now, with a label at an angle of precisely 24 degrees. No big deal, you might think, but you'd be wrong. The square bottle meant less breakages and more bottles per ship. The diagonal label meant larger type, and together that meant Johnny Walker had unmistakable presence on any shelf in the bottle. The bottle became an icon, and the rich liquid it contained sought after and consumed across the globe. What a character, Alexander Walker. Master of the blender's art, ambitious, uncompromising, just a walker. It was John's grandsons, George and Alexander II's turn to join him in his journey. They led the brand into the 20th century. By 1909, they had developed the iconic red label and black, and persuaded Tom Brown, the best young illustrator of the day, to sketch a striding man in a napkin during a business lunch. In the stroke of a pen, the Victorian grocer was transformed into an Edwardian dad. By 1920, Johnny's walk had taken him through 120 countries, and he continued walking through the brand's advertising over the next 50 years, into the fabric of global culture, deep into the dark hearts of several wars, to the pleasure palaces of the aristocracy, immortalised by screen legends, celebrated by filmmakers, singers, songwriters, novelists, shoulder to shoulder with the great spokesmen of the age. Winning countless international awards for quality, and even being awarded the Royal Warrant by King George V. No going back after that. Not that going back would even have occurred to Johnny or any of his family. By the end of the 20th century, the familiar red label and black label were joined by the green label, the gold label, and the grandest of them all, Johnny Walker Blue Label. By the beginning of the 21st century, Johnny Walker wasn't just the world's biggest whiskey brand, but an international symbol of progress. The brand Keep Walking mantra, adopted by pro-democracy protesters and parliamentary speechwriters. What would the farm-born Victorian grocer have thought of all of this? He'd have loved a Victorian farm-born grocer he might have been, but he and the family that followed him were possessed by a fiery ambition with the skill and intelligence to match. 200 years later, and Johnny Walker's still walking, and he's not showing any signs of stopping.
Well, I feel like having a whiskey after, but I haven't seen this one. That's the sort of warmth that the legend really creates. And those of you who are interested in filming, this film won a gold at the Cannes because it's a single take shot. Yeah, so the entire film has been shot in a single take, inspired by the Russian Ark, which is a movie which came out in 2002, which is a 90-minute film with about over 3,000 actors, which is again being shot in a single take. So really incredible piece, and therefore, as a brand manager, knowing about your brand myth, your legend, your story, your roots is exceptionally important. It energizes you, it gives you brand ideas, it tells you new stories, new ways of engaging your consumers and activating your brand, and at the same time, therefore, nurturing and nourishing your roots. So it's exceptionally important to be uncompromising, what your brand strength is. Equally, at the same time, you may question that if I'm going to be so obsessively uncompromising about my brand core, will I be able to be adaptive? Yeah, it's quite surprising, in my 20 years, the clearer you are about your brand, the more adaptive you can be. Yeah, the less clear you're about your brand, the less adaptive you can be, because then you're fishing in a much larger pond and you're struggling actually. So if you look at this brand, so when it went to China, this is what they did to the Striding Man. So they adapted it as part of their launch campaign without losing its essence. So you can still see the Scottish kilt, yeah, but you don't miss, the Chinese empathetic character that they've given to the Striding Man. So they've adapted the brand. It doesn't quite look exactly what it is, but it's a good launch campaign. It allows you to do those things because you're super clear about what your brand stands for. It allows you to tell very inspirational stories. The brand purpose of Johnny Walker is all about keep walking, and they've started a new campaign early this year, which is about From the Future, which is about what you yourself will be in the future, and the future you tells you, come on, there's a great future for you. And this is the story of Jenson Button, as we would know, who was the 2009 Formula One world champion, who actually failed his first driving test. So imagine if he had given up after his first failed driving test, the world would have missed a great world champion. So it's all about hope and not getting trapped in today's frustration. So being clear about your brand purpose allows you to be adaptive to today's stories, to today's events, to today's what's happening in the world, and therefore moving the brand forward. It also allows you to play around with your brand iconic, and yet communicating a message. So this is a message about drinking, in a responsible way, or against abusive drinking. And look at how that social message has been adapted to the Striding Man. And immediately you get it, that it's Johnny Walker, it's against the Striding Man, yeah, and this is not what you want to do to yourself, or to your friends, or to your family after you've had a drink. So it's about responsible drinking. So it allows you to be adaptive. And therefore, in my experience, the clearer you are about your brand, the more adaptive you can be. Yeah, and it's not quite the reverse. We already saw this, so let me move on. So that's one example, and I thought I'd share with you another example, which is another one of my favorite brands. It's not though targeted towards me, but since I am in the world of beauty, I do tend to read a lot of this, which is the Cosmopolitan magazine, which is again a brand which is nearly 150 years old. This brand was born in 1886, and that's one of their first manifestos. It's not the magazine, the first manifesto that they took out, and this is the brand myth. In the words of the founder, Paul, there will be a department devoted exclusively to the concerns of women, with articles on fashion, on household decoration, on cooking, and the care and management of children, etc. That was his vision. And that's why he launched the Cosmopolitan magazine, and this is the first issue of May 1896. And if you look there, it is still about a woman who is fairly confident, a little Victorian if you may say so, but quite confident and in some ways a little liberated. Yeah, do not forget this is 150 years back. You know, and this is pre the feminist era, you know, and what the society had labeled women's roles to be. So it was quite challenging times. But here comes a visionary and says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a department, not a physical one, but one that can be carried in your hand for this magazine called the Cosmopolitan. And that's the brand myth, yeah? And exceptionally important for you to retain and remember that. But oftentimes, as I was mentioning earlier, brand managers come and editors come and they start forgetting what the brand myth is, and then they start compromising the brand myth. And this is a compromise that somebody made in 1978, and they launched the Cosmopolitan Man. So there must be somebody out there sitting saying, listen, we're appealing to only half the world's population, let's go after men. Pretty much similar to the conversation we talked about the Gillette. Yeah, and let's launch a Cosmopolitan Man. And there was 1978, this issue of Jack Nicholson that came out, you know, with Antoine, you know, which got launched. And not surprisingly, and fortunately for brand lovers and for people who, you know, are into marketing, it was a single issue and the project was shut down. And quite rightly so. Yeah. Imagine if you had a Cosmopolitan Man today and you had a Cosmopolitan woman, how diffused the brand would have been. Yeah, and probably would have been half the size, because it's quite tempting to say we're going after men, that's another half of the world, but you would have lost more women in the progress, and you'd probably lost it to some of the other magazines. And they went on to then launch a brand called Aspire, which is then, you know, targeted at men. So it's important to look at brand extensions, launch new brands, rather than, you know, look at varianting your brand and losing its purpose. And therefore, another compromise that happened, yeah, so probably another change in management. Yeah, 1999, and they launched the Cosmo Girl, and they said, okay, we are going international. We want to appeal to the teenagers. It's a growing part of the world population, and let's launch the Cosmo Girl. But if you look at the Cosmo Girl cover, it's quite not the same. I mean, she's girly, she's teeny poppy, she's energetic, she's vibrant, but she's not a confident, liberated woman. It doesn't quite meet the same specs of what the brand purpose was when it started. And fortunately, this project was shut down as well in 2008. And they went back to their roots and said, no, we are about a sexually liberated woman, a confident woman, a woman's problems, woman's issues, woman management, and that's what we're going to do. Yeah, so that's a great example to my mind about what the brand purpose was, how it got compromised, and how they went back on to managing the brand. Exceptionally important. But do they adapt? Absolutely they do. They are available in 120 countries. And they adapt exceptionally well now, and that's a great sign. So if you look at the cover of the Cosmopolitan USA magazine, you're obviously able to see the deep necklines, you're able to see much more of skin show, you're able to see much bigger words around, you know, words like sex and provocative words, you know, which makes the magazine sell. So that's the USA version of Cosmopolitan. But when you go to India, it gets a little more modest. Yeah, you start seeing you know, a lot less deeper necklines, but you still capture the same essence of the brand, which is about a confident, liberated woman. Yeah, and over here it's through Bollywood actresses, so the way she's standing, her hairstyle, the look of beauty, the confident glint in her eyes. The brand essence is exactly the same, but it's been adaptive to India so that it meets the cultural requirements of India and builds empathy. If you come down to Malaysia, it gets even more modest. Yeah, you're no longer able to see even the underarms or the shoulders, which is not allowed in that society. And then you start respecting that, and then consumers there say, wow, here is a brand, which respects my culture and builds brand empathy. So it works wonderfully, both from the angle of the brand as well as the consumer. So a great example of how a brand which is always playing on the edge, yeah, whose proposition is about being edgy, is able to adapt to very, very moderate, sort of cultures. So a great example to my mind. And therefore, in my concluding remarks, I think brand building is like a tightrope walking. You do that every day. There are many temptations that come in your way. There are many pulls and pressures that come in your way. But you need to ensure that you're doing the tightrope walking by being uncompromising and being adaptive at the same time. And the only way you can do that is if you know your brand sense very well. And as a brand team, it's important that you embody the brand, you live your brand every day, you use your brand every day, yeah, and at the same time, in your brand team, you've embedded the culture. So I have a team of about 17 to 18 people from 12 different nationalities, yeah, and every time we have a discussion on Myanmar, there's a lady who says, that's not the way we do it in Myanmar. And then you say, wow, she's right. Or there's a Vietnamese girl, yeah, or there's an Australian girl in my team, or there is somebody from any other country. So it's really important to embed the culture in your team and you embody the brand. I think that's the way you'd be uncompromising while being adaptive. And then, as a brand, apart from the financial aspect of it, which I'm sure Samir and Brand Finance will tell you is an exceptionally profitable way of doing it, you start becoming enduring over hundreds of years, and you start becoming a brand that's loved. Yeah? Finally, I owe this entire thought to Instance Research and Consultancy, who's helped me put this together. I was traveling, and to the umpteen number of mistakes that I've made in the last 30 years. Yeah, so sharing my learnings with you, and a big thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. So yeah, thank you.